What about the longer term strategy about economic policy? What about the post-COVID world? So here also, the same point is valid. The post-COVID world is not going to be a reinflation of the pre-COVID world. I have no idea, no matter what various experts may do on PowerPoint and various consultants may do with nice, colorful graphs. I have no idea how the world will be in 10 years' time. I do not know what technologies will have succeeded and which will have failed. I do not know how the geopolitics will have evolved. And you can see that these things can change overnight, as happened in Afghanistan. I don't know how consumer behavior will be. I have no idea about many, many things. So how do I make policy for a world which I do not know, especially in the long term? Well, in this context, let me say two things matter. One is resilience against shocks. Two, flexibility and adaptation. Now, I want to make this clear that this is not so different from the barbell strategy I was talking about earlier. Basically, the point is adapt to things as they happen as well as possible and have a safety net, have resilience, and be able to take the hit if and when some big shock comes and hits you. Now, that hit could be natural disaster, it could be external aggression, it could be any number of other things. It could be health emergency, it could be any number of other things. So having state capacity to deal with that is important. Having industrial capacity and intellectual capacity to be able to do that is also important. At the same time, you need to flexibly move forward. So let me show you how we have incorporated that into economic policy. And importantly, how does that fit with the idea of Atmanirbhar Bharat, which, as I will show you, has nothing to do with pre-1991 import substitution and license permit Raj, which some people think it may be connected to. It is not. So if I'm dealing with such a lot of uncertainty, the most important thing obviously is that our factor markets are flexible, right? Our labor force should be able to deal with the new exigencies. We should be able to reallocate resources, land and state resources. We should be able to open out and deregulate new sectors and be able to move forward. So now you can see very clearly the kinds of policies we have done, particularly in the last 18 months, but even in the longer run. Why, for example, one of the important things that this government has done is insolvency and bankruptcy. Because this is a part of creative destruction. Keeping alive inefficient companies is a bad thing. In the old days, in the name of, saving jobs and so on, we would very often keep these dinosaur companies alive for decades, when in fact they were gobbling up huge amounts of resources which could be deployed in doing other things. But we didn't do that because we didn't have a conception of creative destruction. We had these ideas that giving out licenses would somehow, some bureaucrat sitting in Delhi knew what kinds of outcomes and technologies were going to emerge. And in fact, you had the ironical situation of many industry bodies, and this happens even today, coming and saying, the government should create a fund and invest in technologies. You've got to be kidding me. What on earth makes you think that a bureaucrat knows where the future is going to be? If he knew, why on earth is he wasting his time as a joint secretary in department of XYZ? He should be Elon Musk. So this entire approach is fundamentally flawed. So what you need here is to open things up. And just in the last few months, you would have seen, we have introduced a drone policy, a very liberal drone policy, allows you to experiment. Now, we know some things may go wrong, but that's okay. All experimentation is based on things going wrong. Same thing has happened with opening up the geospatial and cartography sector. It used to be a monopoly of the Survey of India. We opened it up completely. Now, all kinds of people are coming and doing all kinds of interesting things in this sector. We removed telecom regulations on the BPO and IT-enabled services. Very heavy regulations were there for reasons that are entirely inexplicable They were there for some 20 odd years and were getting in the way of innovation. We have gotten rid of those as well. In the financial sector, we have created something called bilateral netting that allows for the CDS market to evolve. Now, of course, derivatives can be misused, but on the other hand, not having them means that an entire area of finance and risk taking doesn't get evolved, whether it's corporate debt markets or derivatives. So while you do need to retain certain regulations to be able to sort of hedge out the very worst behavior of people who deal with these instruments, simply saying that we shouldn't allow them is a bad idea. The same thing is true of trade invoice factoring. We used to never allow this, whereas it is an obvious way to get quick financing to the MSME sector by allowing them to raise finances against their invoices. But we didn't allow it till just about a month ago. And the trade factoring bill has now opened that up. The rules should be out any day now. And an entirely new area of financing is open for our banks and NBFCs. So you can see that this is a consistent thinking about deregulation. The same thinking is there about getting the labor laws done. For, when I was at university some 30 odd years ago, labor laws were being discussed even at that time. We didn't do anything till just a few months, a year or two ago. And now India has got completely liberal labor laws, which protect labor where it needs to be protected and is flexible where it needs to be flexible so that you can redeploy our labor force. Exact same thinking behind our monetization and privatization. If you've got resources that are stuck in old mill lands in, say, Kanpur, they should be redeployed. It's about flexibility and adaptation. Just because, 100 years ago, this real estate was valuable for running a textile mill in the middle of Kanpur doesn't mean today it doesn't have better uses. Surely using those hundreds of acres, which happen to be in the middle of Kanpur, should be used to create new parks, new hospitals, new residential areas, new offices, and other urban amenities that that city needs. Instead, those lands which are valuable are simply lying there. This is true of old derelict warehouses along the Hooghly River in Kolkata, or the old port area of Mumbai. These need to be monetized and redeployed. This is the point about continuous churn. It does not matter what some great planner decades ago thought, because the world has moved on. And the same mistake we do with urban planning. So you can clearly see how this kind of thinking is different from the old thinking.